I walked out of my house on a Tuesday morning in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, ready to head to work, and stopped dead in my tracks when I saw 4 shiny metal bike racks bolted into the grass strip between my sidewalk and the street. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had warned me. They were just there, gleaming in the desert sun like some kind of metallic intrusion on my property. My name is Derek Matthews, and I had lived in the Saguaro Heights subdivision for 3 years. It was one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods with beige houses, strict landscaping rules, and an HOA that seemed to think they owned every blade of grass in a 5-mile radius. I had dealt with them before over the color of my mailbox, which apparently was half a shade too dark according to their approved color palette. But this was different. This was actual construction on my property without my permission. I walked closer to examine the bike racks. They were professional installations, the kind you see outside grocery stores or parks. Heavy-duty steel, powder-coated black, with concrete anchors drilled right through the grass and into the ground below. Each rack could hold maybe 3 or 4 bikes. I counted the bolts. 12 per rack. 48 holes total in what was technically my grass strip, even though the city had an easement for utilities. My neighbor Paul was getting his newspaper from his driveway. He was retired, maybe 65, and had lived in the neighborhood since it was built in 2008. He saw me staring at the bike racks and walked over. "They got you too," he said, shaking his head. "What do you mean, got me too?" I asked. "Check down the street. They installed them in front of every third house on this block, some initiative the HOA president cooked up. Something about promoting green transportation and bike-friendly community values." Paul made air quotes with his fingers when he said that last part. I looked down Mesquite Drive and sure enough, I could see more bike racks dotting the grass strips. Some houses had them, others did not. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason to the placement. "Did they ask you?" I said. "Nope. Woke up yesterday and they were there. Got a notice in my mailbox after the fact saying it was part of a community improvement project funded by our HOA dues." Paul handed me a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Here, I grabbed your notice too when I saw it sticking out of your mailbox this morning. Thought you might want to see it." I unfolded the paper. It was printed on HOA letterhead with their logo, a stylized saguaro cactus that always looked vaguely threatening to me. The notice was dated 3 days ago. "Dear homeowner," it began. "The Saguaro Heights Homeowners Association is pleased to announce the installation of community bicycle parking facilities as part of our ongoing commitment to sustainable living and alternative transportation options. These bike racks have been strategically placed throughout the neighborhood to encourage residents and visitors to utilize bicycle transportation. The bike racks are installed on public easement areas and comply with all local ordinances. Thank you for your cooperation in making Saguaro Heights a greener community. Sincerely, Patricia Moreland, HOA President." Patricia Moreland. I had met her exactly twice. Once at a mandatory HOA meeting where she spent 40 minutes discussing the importance of keeping garage doors closed during daylight hours, and once when she personally came to my door to inform me that my trash cans were visible from the street 15 minutes before the allowed time on a Thursday morning. She was in her early 50s, had that haircut that somehow every HOA president seemed to have, the one that said she wanted to speak to the manager before there was even a problem, and she wore blazers with shoulder pads like it was still 1987. "This is insane," I said. "They cannot just build stuff on my property." "Technically it is the easement," Paul said, "but yeah, it feels like they should have asked. Or at least given us real notice before they did it, not after." I stood there in the Arizona heat, already feeling the sun bearing down even though it was only 7 in the morning. The bike racks bothered me on multiple levels. First, the principle of the thing. Second, they were ugly and I had not asked for them. Third, and this was the kicker, they were going to die. The grass strip was already struggling in the desert climate. I watered it, but it was a constant battle. Now, there were 48 holes and 4 massive metal structures blocking sunlight and making it impossible to maintain that section properly. I went to work at the engineering firm where I did project management, but I could not concentrate. I spent my lunch break researching property easements and HOA authority in Arizona. What I found was complicated. The grass strip, sometimes called a parkway or tree lawn, was indeed technically city property in most Phoenix suburbs. However, the homeowner was typically responsible for maintenance. More importantly, while the city had utility easement rights, that did not automatically extend to HOAs installing whatever they wanted. I called the city planning office. After being transferred 3 times, I got someone named Miguel who actually seemed to know what he was talking about. "So the HOA installed bike racks in the parkway?" Miguel asked. "Yes, without asking me or apparently pulling any permits," I said. I heard typing on the other end. "Let me check our permit database. What is the address?" I gave him my address on Mesquite Drive. More typing. "Yeah, I am not seeing any permits for bike rack installation at that location. They would need a right-of-way permit for that kind of work, even on the easement." "Do you have any documentation from the HOA about this?" "Just a notice they left after the fact," I said. "You should file a complaint with code enforcement." "Without a permit, that is an illegal installation. The city can make them remove it." I felt a small surge of vindication. "How do I file that complaint?" Miguel walked me through the process. "It would take a few days for someone to come out and inspect, then they would issue a notice to whoever installed the racks." It was not fast, but it was something. When I got home that evening, I took a closer look at the bike racks. They were actually pretty nice, quality-wise. Heavy steel construction, probably worth a decent amount of money. I took photos from every angle, measured them, and noted the brand name stamped into the metal: Cycle Secure Pro Series. I went inside and looked them up online. Brand new, these racks retailed for about $250 each. Used ones were selling on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist for anywhere from $60 to $120 depending on condition. These were pristine. An idea started forming in my head. It was probably not a great idea. It might even be a slightly terrible idea. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If the HOA had installed these without permits, they were illegal. If they were illegal, the city would make them remove them anyway. Why should the HOA get to take them back after they had already violated my property rights and dug holes in my grass strip? I went to my garage and found my socket wrench set. The bolts on the bike racks were standard hex heads, nothing special. I could have them off in maybe an hour if I worked efficiently, but I waited. I was not impulsive, despite what my ex-girlfriend used to say. I wanted to make sure I was not about to do something monumentally stupid that would land me in legal trouble. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not a big fancy one, just a general practice attorney named Sarah Chen who had helped me with my home purchase closing a few years back. I explained the situation. "So let me get this straight," Sarah said. "The HOA installed structures on the public easement in front of your house without permits, without your permission, and without prior notice." "Correct." "Notice came after installation," I said, "and you have already filed a complaint with the city." "Yesterday," I heard her humming thoughtfully. "Here is the thing, the easement issue is tricky. They should not have installed anything without permits, that much is clear. Whether you have the right to remove them yourself is murkier. You could potentially be liable for destruction of property, even if it is illegally placed." "What if I just considered it abandoned property?" I asked. "That would be a stretch." "It was clearly just installed. There is no reasonable argument for abandonment." "Okay, but hypothetically, if someone were to remove them and the HOA wanted them back, They would have to admit they installed them illegally in the first place, right? Sarah laughed. You are thinking about removing them yourself, are not you? Maybe. Derek, as your attorney, I have to advise you that is probably not a great idea. As your friend, I will say that I understand the impulse, and if you do decide to go that route, document everything. Photos, the notice they gave you, communication attempts with the HOA, everything. And technically, if someone were to remove illegally installed structures from an easement they maintain, one could argue they were simply clearing the right-of-way of unauthorized obstructions. So that is a maybe, I said. That is a maybe with a lot of caveats and no promises I can defend you if it goes sideways. I thanked her and hung up. I had my answer, sort of. It was risky, but not completely insane. That evening, I drafted an email to the HOA. I kept it professional and fact-based. I explained that I had not given permission for the bike racks, that they were interfering with my ability to maintain the grass strip, and that I had checked with the city and no permits had been pulled. I requested they remove the bike racks within 7 days. I sent the email to the general HOA email address listed on their website, and CC'd Patricia Moreland directly using the email address from previous correspondence. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number but local area code, I answered. Is this Derek Matthews? A woman's voice asked. She sounded irritated already. Yes, this is Derek. This is Patricia Moreland from the Saguaro Heights HOA. I just received your email and I have to say, I find your tone very concerning. I had specifically kept my tone neutral and professional, but okay. I am just requesting information about the bike racks installed in front of my home, I said. Those bike racks are part of a community improvement initiative that was approved by the HOA board. They benefit everyone in the neighborhood. I understand that may be your intention, but I was not notified before installation, and the city says you did not pull permits. We do not need permits for improvements on HOA property, Patricia said, her voice getting sharper. It is not HOA property, it is a city easement, and the city says you absolutely need permits. The HOA has authority over all aspects of the community appearance and amenities. That includes the parkway areas. I pinched the bridge of my nose. This was going exactly how I expected. Miss Moreland, I am asking formally that you remove the bike racks from in front of my house within 7 days. They are damaging my grass, and I did not consent to their installation. They are staying exactly where they are. This is not negotiable. And I should remind you that any interference with HOA property or initiatives can result in fines. Are you threatening to fine me for objecting to something you built on my property without permission? I am informing you of HOA policy. Have a good evening, Mr. Matthews. She hung up. I sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand. That went well. The next day was Saturday. I woke up early around 6 in the morning. The neighborhood was quiet. I put on work clothes and went to the garage. I grabbed my socket wrench set, an adjustable wrench as backup, and a flathead screwdriver. I also brought my phone to document everything. The bike racks were bolted down tight, but the bolts were not extraordinary. Standard half-inch hex heads. I started with the first rack, working methodically. Each bolt took some effort since they had been torqued down properly during installation, but I had leverage and patience. The first rack took about 20 minutes to fully detach. Once the bolts were out, the rack lifted away cleanly, though it was heavy, probably 60 pounds of steel. I carried it to my garage and set it inside. I was starting on the second rack when Paul came out in his bathrobe with a cup of coffee. "Well, you are really doing it," he said. "Yep, need help?" I looked at him. "You do not have to get involved in this. Derek, they put 6 of these things in front of my house. 6. My entire grass strip looks like a bike parking lot. I am invested." Paul went back inside and came out 5 minutes later in jeans and a t-shirt. Together, we made quick work of the remaining 3 racks in front of my house. We had all 4 in my garage by 7:30. You know they are going to lose their minds, Paul said, breathing a bit hard from the exertion. Probably. What are you going to do with them? Sell them, these are worth money, Paul laughed. I love it. Okay, I am in, let us do mine. We walked down to Paul's house. He had not been exaggerating. There were 6 bike racks lined up along his grass strip. It looked absurd, like someone was planning to host a cycling convention specifically in front of his house. Why did they put so many here? I asked. No idea, maybe because I have a corner lot. Maybe Patricia just does not like me. I honestly cannot tell you. We spent the next hour and a half removing all 6 racks from Paul's property. By the time we finished, it was almost 9 in the morning and more neighbors were up and about. A few people slowed down as they drove past, staring at us loading bike racks into Paul's truck. Janet from across the street came over. She was maybe 40, worked from home doing something with computers. Are you guys stealing bike racks? She asked, half joking. Nope, removing illegally installed structures from our property, I said. Wait, are those the things the HOA put in? I heard about those. Sure are. They put 2 in front of my house too. I hate them, they look ridiculous. Paul and I exchanged glances. Want us to remove them? Paul asked. Janet bit her lip, thinking, would I get in trouble? Probably, I said honestly. But they installed them without permits and without permission. I figure if they want them back, they can go through proper legal channels. Screw it. Yes, take them. By noon, we had removed 22 bike racks from 8 different houses on our street. Word had spread quickly. Homeowners were actually coming to us and asking us to remove the racks. Paul's truck was full, my garage was packed, and we had started staging racks in Paul's backyard. My phone rang. Patricia Murland again. What do you think you are doing? She demanded without preamble. Removing illegal structures from easements that homeowners are responsible for maintaining, I said calmly. Those are HOA property you are stealing. They are unlicensed, unpermitted installations that were placed without consent. I consider them abandoned materials. I am calling the police. Feel free. I have already filed a complaint with the city about the illegal installations. I am sure the police will be interested in the fact that you built structures without permits. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end. You are going to regret this. The HOA will fine you into oblivion. Looking forward to seeing you try. Have a great day, Patricia. I hung up before she could respond. 20 minutes later, a Phoenix police cruiser rolled down the street. I had been expecting this. The officer who got out was young, maybe late 20s, with a name tag that read Officer Torres. Afternoon, he said. Got a call about some stolen property? Hi, officer. I am Derek Matthews. I am the one who removed the bike racks, along with several neighbors. They were installed by our HOA without permits and without homeowner consent. I showed him the notice from the HOA, the photos I had taken before removal, and the complaint number from the City Code Enforcement Office. Officer Torres looked everything over. So the HOA installed these without asking, correct, and without pulling permits from the city, and they are calling it theft, apparently. He scratched his head. This sounds like a civil matter. It is a dispute between you and your HOA. We cannot really do anything unless there is clear evidence of theft, and since these were installed on easements you maintain without your permission, that is pretty murky. So what happens now? I asked. I will file a report noting that you have the bike racks and that you are disputing the HOA's right to have installed them. If they want them back, they will probably have to take you to small claims court. But honestly, based on what you are showing me, you might have a decent case. Not a lawyer, though, so do not quote me on that. Another car pulled up as Officer Torres was wrapping up. It was a silver Lexus SUV, and Patricia Moreland emerged from it like an angry hornet leaving its nest. She was wearing a blazer despite it being 95 degrees outside. "Officer, thank goodness you are here. This man has stolen HOA property," she pointed at me dramatically. Officer Torres turned to face her. "Ma'am, I have already spoken with Mr. Matthews. This appears to be a civil dispute between homeowners and the HOA. Civil dispute. He has stolen thousands of dollars worth of bike racks. Bike racks that were installed without permits and without homeowner consent," I added. "We do not need their consent. We are the HOA." Officer Torres held up his hand. "Ma'am, the HOA does not have unlimited authority to install structures. If permits were required and not obtained, that is a code enforcement issue. If the homeowners did not consent to installations on easements they maintain, that is a civil matter. Either way, this is not a criminal matter for police involvement. This is outrageous. I want to file charges. You can file a report, but I am telling you right now that the district attorney is not going to prosecute this as theft. You will need to pursue this through civil channels." Patricia's face was turning red. "What are your badge numbers? I am reporting this to your supervisor." Officer Torres, to his credit, remained completely calm. "My badge number is 2847. You can file a complaint with the department if you like. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "You are useless," Patricia snapped, then turned to me. "You have not heard the end of this." She got back in her Lexus and peeled out, tires squealing slightly on the hot asphalt. Officer Torres watched her go, then looked at me. "She seems nice." "She is a real peach," I said. "Look, off the record, document everything. Every interaction, every email, every photo. If she's going to come after you, you want a paper trail that shows you acted reasonably and she did not." "Already on it," I said. After Officer Torres left, Paul came over with a beer. Well, that was exciting. We sat in my driveway, looking at the now rack-free grass strips. They looked so much better already, even with the bolt holes that I would need to patch with soil and grass seed. "What is the plan for all of these racks?" Paul asked. "Sell them." I looked them up. "We can probably get $80 to $100 each if we list them right. Split the profits. You helped remove them, so yeah, fair is fair." We spent the next hour photographing the bike racks and creating listings on Facebook Marketplace. I wrote honest descriptions. Cycle Secure Pro Series bike rack, heavy-duty steel construction, excellent condition, can hold 3 to 4 bikes, perfect for business or home use. I priced them at $85 each, figuring I had room to negotiate. I posted 10 listings, using different photos for each one so they did not look like duplicate posts. Within an hour I had 12 messages. People loved these things. Apparently good quality bike racks were in demand. Coffee shops wanted them. Apartment complexes wanted them. A guy who ran a bike repair business wanted to buy 4 at once. By Sunday evening, I had sold 8 bike racks for a total of $680. Paul had sold another 5 for $500. We still had 9 left but had interested buyers messaging us. Monday morning, I found a notice taped to my door. It was from the HOA, printed on their official letterhead. "Notice of violation and fine, dear Mr. Matthews. It has come to the attention of the Saguaro Heights HOA Board that you have removed HOA property without authorization. This constitutes theft and vandalism of community improvements. You are hereby fined $500 for each bike rack removed from in front of your property, totaling $2,000. Additionally, you are fined $200 per day until the bike racks are returned or replaced. Payment is due within 15 days. Furthermore, you are in violation of HOA CCR Section 4.8 regarding interference with HOA improvement projects. Continued violations may result in additional fines and legal action. including placing a lien on your property. You must immediately return all removed bike racks and cease any further interference with HOA property. Sincerely, Patricia Moreland, HOA President, Saguaro Heights HOA Board. I read the notice 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise each time. $2,000 in fines, plus $200 per day, for removing bike racks they had illegally installed. I took a photo of the notice and immediately forwarded it to Sarah Chen, my attorney. Then I sent a copy to the City Code Enforcement Office as additional documentation. Sarah called me back within an hour. "Derek, this is insane. They cannot fine you for removing illegally installed structures. But can they put a lien on my house? They can try, but any lien based on illegitimate fines would be challengeable in court. However, I am going to be straight with you. Fighting this could get expensive. HOAs have money and lawyers on retainer. You would be looking at legal fees that could easily exceed the fines themselves. So what do I do? First, do not pay anything. Document that you are refusing to pay and why. Second, we wait for the city to respond to your code enforcement complaint. If the city determines the bike racks were illegally installed, that significantly strengthens your position. Third, start gathering support from other homeowners. The more people who are on your side, the harder it is for the HOA to single you out. I thanked her and started making calls. I reached out to every homeowner whose racks we had removed. I also started researching the HOA board structure and meeting minutes. What I found was interesting. The HOA board consisted of 5 members. Patricia Moreland as president, 2 vice presidents named Ron Schaffer and Denise Kim, and 2 general board members named Steve Paulson and Margaret Whitaker. According to the bylaws, major expenditures over $5,000 required a vote of the full board. I did some rough math. 22 bike racks at $250 each retail was $5,500 minimum, plus installation costs. That had to be at least $8,000 or $9,000 total. Had the board actually voted on this? I started digging through the HOA meeting minutes posted on their website. The most recent meeting was from 3 weeks ago. I found the relevant section. President Moreland proposed a community bicycle initiative to promote green transportation. Motion to approve exploratory committee. Approved 3-2. Kim and Paulson voting nay. An exploratory committee was not approval for installation. That was just approval to look into it. I kept reading through minutes from subsequent special meetings. Nothing. There was no record of an actual vote to spend money on bike rack installation. This was getting better and better. I compiled everything into a document. The lack of permits, the lack of proper board approval, the after-the-fact notice, the threatening fines. Then I drafted an email to every homeowner in the subdivision. The HOA website had an old directory that was probably violating about 12 privacy laws, but I used it anyway. Dear neighbors, you may have noticed bike racks appearing throughout our neighborhood recently. What you may not know is that these were installed without proper city permits, without homeowner consent, and potentially without proper HOA board approval. Several homeowners, myself included, have removed these racks from the easements we are responsible for maintaining. The HOA president is now threatening thousands of dollars in fines and liens against our properties. I believe the HOA has overstepped its authority and violated both city ordinances and its own bylaws. If you are concerned about this issue or have been affected by it, please consider attending the next HOA meeting on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. at the community center. We have a right to have our voices heard and to demand accountability from the board we elected. Respectfully, Derek Matthews, Mesquite Drive. I hit send and immediately felt both empowered and terrified. I had just declared war on the HOA in a very public way. My phone started ringing almost immediately. Some neighbors thanked me. Others expressed concern about making waves. A few told me I was crazy for taking on the HOA. One elderly woman named Gladys said she had been trying to fight the HOA for years over various issues and wished me luck. Tuesday morning, I got a call from the City Code Enforcement Office. It was a different person this time, someone named Rachel Gomez. Mr. Matthews, I have been assigned your complaint regarding unpermitted bike rack installations in the Saguaro Heights subdivision. I did a site visit yesterday, and, I asked, hopeful. Well, the bike racks are gone, which complicates things, but I was able to verify the concrete anchor holes and I checked our permit database. No permits were pulled for this work. I am issuing a notice of violation to the HOA for unpermitted construction in the public right-of-way. What does that mean for them? They will have to pay a fine to the city, likely around $500. They will also need to repair any damage to the public easement areas. If they want to reinstall the bike racks, they will need to apply for proper permits and potentially get approval from each affected homeowner. Can you send me a copy of that notice of violation? I asked. I can email you a copy once it is officially issued, probably by end of day tomorrow. I thanked her profusely. This was exactly what I needed. Wednesday afternoon, I received the official notice of violation from the city. It was a beautiful document, full of official language about unauthorized construction, right-of-way violations, and required remediation. I immediately forwarded it to Sarah Chen and also prepared copies to bring to the HOA meeting the next day. Thursday evening arrived. I got to the community center early, around 6:30. The meeting room was a generic space with folding chairs and a long table at the front for the board members. Usually these meetings had maybe 10 or 15 residents show up, mostly retirees with nothing better to do. By 6:45, the room was packed. There had to be 60 or 70 people there. Paul was there, along with Janet and most of the other homeowners whose racks we had removed. I also saw a lot of faces I did not recognize, people who apparently had opinions about the bike rack situation. Patricia Moreland arrived at exactly 7 p.m., flanked by the other board members. She looked shocked at the turnout. I saw her eyes scan the room and land on me. If looks could kill, I would have been vaporized. "Let us call this meeting to order," Patricia said, her voice tight. "We have a lot of ground to cover tonight." "We sure do," someone called out from the crowd. A few people laughed. Patricia's jaw clenched. "We will start with standard board reports." "Ron, do you want to give the treasurer's report?" Ron Schaffer was a bland-looking man in his 60s who seemed perpetually confused. Yes. The HOA currently has approximately $43,000 in reserve, and our monthly operating budget is on track. "How much did we spend on the bike racks?" someone shouted. Ron looked uncomfortable. "That was a capital improvement expense of approximately $9,200. The room erupted in conversations. $9,000. "That is a major expenditure," someone yelled. "Was that put to a homeowner vote?" Patricia banged a gavel I did not even know she had. "Order." "That expenditure was approved by the board as part of our community improvement mandate." I stood up. According to the meeting minutes, the only vote was to approve an exploratory committee. There is no record of a vote to actually spend money on installation. Patricia's face flushed. Exploratory committee approval included implementation approval. "That is not what exploratory means," I said. "And more importantly, these bike racks were installed without city permits in violation of code. I have documentation from Phoenix Code Enforcement." I held up the notice of violation. Several people around me craned to see it. "Let me see that," Denise Kim said from the board table. She was one of the 2 board members who had voted against the exploratory committee. I walked up and handed her the document. She read it, her expression darkening. Patricia, did you pull permits for this project? We do not need permits for HOA improvements, Patricia insisted. It says right here that unpermitted construction in the public right-of-way is a violation and that the city is assessing fines, Denise said. The room was buzzing now. Steve Paulson, the other board member who had voted no, spoke up. Patricia, I specifically asked about permits in our committee discussion. You said it was handled. It was a minor administrative matter, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. A $500 fine from the city is not minor, I said. And neither is threatening homeowners with thousands of dollars in fines for removing structures that were illegally installed on easements they maintain. I pulled out the violation notice Patricia had left on my door and held it up. The HOA is trying to fine me $2,000 plus $200 per day for removing bike racks that the city says were illegally installed. The room exploded. Everyone started talking at once. Several people were standing up, shouting questions at the board. Patricia was banging her gavel, but nobody was paying attention. This is ridiculous, someone shouted. She spent $9 grand without proper approval. I got one of those fine notices too, Janet called out. $300 for removing 2 racks from my property. Paul stood up. I removed 6 racks and got fined $1,000. This is extortion. Denise Kim stood up at the board table. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in President Moreland and a motion to rescind all fines related to the bike rack situation. Second, Steve Paulson said immediately. You cannot do that, Patricia said, her voice going shrill. I am the president, and we are the board, and we can absolutely call for a vote, Denise said. All in favor of rescinding the bike rack fines. 4 hands went up. Only Patricia kept her hand down. Motion carries, Denise said. The fines are rescinded. The room burst into applause. Now vote of no confidence in President Moreland, Denise continued. Wait, we need to follow procedure, Ron said nervously. The procedure for a vote of no confidence is a simple majority of the board, Steve said. I have the bylaws right here. He held up a printed document. All in favor? Denise asked. 4 hands went up. Patricia sat there, her face bright red, looking like she might cry or explode. I could not tell which. Motion carries, Denise said. Patricia, you are removed as HOA president, effective immediately. We will hold elections for a new president at next month's meeting. Patricia stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the community center without another word. The room was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Soon, everyone was applauding. Denise took over the meeting. Okay, let us talk about next steps. First, we need to formally respond to the city's notice of violation. Second, we need to address the bike racks that were removed. Derek, do you still have them? I sold most of them, I said honestly, made about $340. Paul sold several more. Denise actually smiled. Well, that is one way to handle it. Given that they were illegally installed and we are now being fined by the city for it, I do not think the HOA has any legitimate claim to demand their return or compensation. Does anyone on the board disagree? Ron, Margaret, and Steve all shook their heads. Then, as far as the HOA is concerned, this matter is closed. Derek, Paul, and anyone else who removed racks, you are not liable for their return or value. The HOA apologizes for the overreach and the threatening notices. More applause. I sat down, feeling a weird mix of relief and residual adrenaline. The rest of the meeting was actually productive. They discussed proper procedures for future community improvements, including homeowner surveys and proper permitting. They also opened a discussion about what actually mattered to residents, and bike racks were way down the list compared to things like street maintenance and better lighting. After the meeting, probably 20 people came up to thank me for standing up to Patricia. Gladys, the elderly woman who had called earlier, gave me a hug and said it was the most entertaining HOA meeting she had been to in 40 years. Paul and I went out for a beer afterward at a sports bar on Camelback Road. "Well, that went better than expected," Paul said, raising his glass. "I honestly thought I might end up with a lien on my house," I admitted. "Instead, you got $340 and became a neighborhood hero," I laughed. "I do not know about hero. I just did not want ugly bike racks in front of my house." "You did more than that. You stood up to someone who was abusing their power. That matters." Over the next few weeks, things settled down. I used some of my bike rack money to buy grass seed and topsoil to repair the anchor holes in my grass strip. Within a month, you could not even tell the racks had been there. Patricia Moreland resigned from the HOA board entirely. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she was embarrassed by the vote of no confidence and was considering moving to a different subdivision. I felt a little bad about that for about 5 seconds, then I remembered the threatening notices and got over it. Denise Kim was elected as the new HOA president in a landslide vote. Her first act was to create a homeowner committee to review all proposed projects before the board could approve spending. Her second act was to send a formal apology letter to everyone who had been threatened with fines. The city's notice of violation was resolved when the HOA paid the $500 fine and agreed to fill in the concrete anchor holes that remained in front of houses where the racks had been removed. They sent a crew around to do the work professionally, which was honestly more than I expected. I sold the last of my bike racks about 2 months after the whole thing started. Final tally, I made exactly $340, just like I told everyone. Paul made around $400. We both agreed it was the most profitable act of civil disobedience either of us had ever committed. The weirdest part of the whole situation was that I became somewhat famous in the neighborhood. People would stop me at the grocery store or at the neighborhood pool to talk about the bike rack incident. I heard it referred to as Rackgate by some people, which I thought was ridiculous, but also kind of funny. A few months later, I was at a neighborhood barbecue when a woman I did not know approached me. She was maybe in her 30s, dressed casually in shorts and a tank top. "You are Derek, right?" "The bike rack guy," I laughed. "That is me, apparently." "I am Emma. I just moved here from Scottsdale. I have to say, hearing about what you did was part of why I bought a house in this neighborhood." "Really?" "Yeah. It showed me that the HOA here might actually be responsive to residents instead of just being dictators. That is rare." We talked for a while. Emma was a physical therapist who worked at a clinic in Temp. She was funny and easy to talk to. By the end of the barbecue, I had her number and plans to get coffee the following weekend. That coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into regular dating. 6 months later, Emma moved in with me. We have been together ever since, and she still jokes that she owes our relationship to illegal bike rack installations. The HOA under Denise's leadership was actually functional. They sent out surveys before proposing any projects. They had transparent budgets. They even reduced the annual HOA fees by 5% by cutting unnecessary expenses and negotiating better contracts with service providers. I stayed involved in HOA meetings, not because I enjoyed them, but because I learned that paying attention to local governance actually mattered. When you let people like Patricia run things without oversight, they will spend $9,000 on bike racks nobody wanted. When you stay engaged, you can actually shape your community. Paul became a board member himself about a year after the bike rack incident. He was good at it, bringing a practical, no-nonsense approach to decisions. He would call me before meetings sometimes to get my take on various proposals. The grass strip in front of my house grew back perfectly. I actually put in some desert-friendly landscaping, replacing some of the grass with decorative rocks and native plants that required less water. It looked better than it ever had and was easier to maintain. I kept the socket wrench set in my garage, prominently displayed on my tool pegboard. Every time I saw it, I smiled, remembering the morning Paul and I spent removing those bike racks. It was such a simple act of resistance, but it changed things. People asked me sometimes if I would do it again, knowing all the trouble it caused. The answer was always yes. Not because I enjoyed conflict, but because there was a principle at stake. HOAs exist to serve homeowners, not the other way around. When they forget that, someone needs to remind them. The $340 I made from selling the bike racks went toward a nice dinner with Emma at a steakhouse in Phoenix. We toasted to illegal bike racks, to standing up for yourself, and to the unexpected ways life can surprise you. I never did see Patricia Moreland again. I heard she moved to a subdivision in Chandler with an even stricter HOA, which seemed fitting somehow. I hope she learned something from the experience, but I was not optimistic. The community center where that fateful HOA meeting took place became a landmark in my personal geography. Every time I drove past it, I remembered the feeling of standing up in that crowded room, holding up the city's notice of violation, and watching the other board members turn on Patricia. It was not that I enjoyed her downfall. I did not. But I was proud that I had not backed down when threatened, that I had done my research, and that I had rallied community support. Those were skills I carried forward into other areas of my life. At work, I became more willing to push back on bad ideas from management. In my personal life, I became better at setting boundaries. The bike rack incident taught me that authority figures are not always right, that rules can be challenged, and that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that makes waves. Emma and I got engaged about 2 years after the bike rack situation. We planned the wedding together, a small ceremony at a venue in Sedona with red rocks and desert views. At the reception, Paul gave a toast that included a joke about bike racks and civil disobedience. Everyone laughed. My parents, who had heard the story multiple times, just shook their heads. My dad pulled me aside at one point and said, "I am proud of you for standing up for yourself, but maybe pick your battles a little more carefully next time." I told him I would try, but we both knew I probably would not. The neighborhood continued to thrive under the new HOA leadership. They installed a real community improvement that everyone actually wanted. A new playground near the community center with modern equipment and shade structures. They surveyed residents first, got input on design, pulled all the proper permits, and completed the project under budget. It was how things were supposed to work. I saw the playground one afternoon when Emma and I were walking our dog, a rescue mutt named Biscuit we had adopted together. Kids were playing on the equipment, parents were chatting on benches, and everything felt calm and normal. "This is nice," Emma said. "Hard to believe this is the same HOA that caused all that drama." "Different leadership makes all the difference," I said. We walked home in the late afternoon sun, the Phoenix heat just starting to break as evening approached. My grass strip looked great, green and healthy with the native plant accents. No bike racks in sight. Inside my garage, the socket wrench set hung on the wall, a reminder of the day I decided I had had enough. The day I took action instead of just complaining. The day I removed 4 bike racks, sparked an HOA revolt, and made $340 in the process. It was not a huge amount of money. It was not a life-changing event in the grand scheme of things. But it mattered to me. It mattered because I stood up for my property rights. It mattered because I did not let someone abuse their authority without challenge. It mattered because I learned I could make a difference in my community when I chose to engage. The bike rack incident became a story I told at parties, a funny anecdote about HOA drama and small-scale rebellion. But it was more than that to me. It was a turning point, a moment when I decided that I would not just accept things I disagreed with, that I would do my research and fight back when necessary. Years later, when we had kids, and they asked me about the socket wrench set displayed so prominently in the garage, I told them the whole story. They thought it was hilarious that their dad had basically stolen bike racks and sold them on Facebook. It was not stealing, I corrected them. It was removing illegally installed structures from property I maintained. My son, who was 8 at the time, said, "That sounds like stealing with extra steps, Dad." Emma laughed so hard she cried. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was stealing with extra steps and a whole lot of justification. But the city agreed the bike racks should not have been there. The HOA board agreed the installation was improper, and I made $340. In the end, that was the legacy of the Great Saguaro Heights bike rack incident of 2025. A reformed HOA, a stronger community, one humiliated HOA president who resigned in disgrace, several homeowners who learned they had power when they organized together, and me with $340 and a story I would tell for the rest of my life. The grass strip in front of my house stood as a testament to the whole affair. Where bike racks once stood uninvited, now only grass and carefully chosen desert plants grew. It was my property, my responsibility, and my choice how to maintain it. The HOA had learned that lesson the hard way. And somewhere out there in Phoenix, maybe in a coffee shop or an apartment complex or a small business, 4 Cycle Secure Pro Series bike racks were being used exactly as intended, holding bicycles for people who actually wanted them there. They found good homes, those racks, with people who paid fair prices and installed them properly, probably with permits. That seemed like a better ending than them sitting in front of my house, unwanted and illegal, symbols of an HOA president's overreach and poor planning. I never did find out what Patricia Moreland thought about the whole situation, whether she felt she had been wronged or whether she recognized she had overstepped. Part of me was curious, but most of me did not care. She was gone from the neighborhood, from the HOA, and from my life. That was resolution enough. The real victory was not humiliating Patricia, or making $340, or even getting the bike racks removed. The real victory was showing that homeowners had rights, that HOAs could be held accountable, and that one person standing up could inspire others to do the same. Paul liked to say I started a revolution over bike racks. I told him that was overdramatic, but in a small way maybe he was right. We did change something in our neighborhood, we made it better. We made it ours, and all it took was a socket wrench set, some determination, and a willingness to deal with an angry HOA president named Patricia Moreland. Looking back now, years later with perspective and distance, I could appreciate the absurdity of it all. The drama, the threats, the packed HOA meeting, the vote of no confidence, all over some bike racks that nobody had wanted in the first place. But absurd or not, it mattered. It mattered to me, to Paul, to Janet, and the other homeowners who had been affected. It mattered because someone had made decisions for us without asking, and we pushed back. We won. And that felt good. The socket wrench set stayed on the garage wall, a permanent fixture and a permanent reminder. Some tools are for building things, some are for fixing things. And some, apparently, are for removing illegally installed bike racks and selling them on Facebook Marketplace for $340. That was my story. That was how I took on my HOA and won. That was how 4 bike racks became the catalyst for change in a suburban Phoenix neighborhood. And that was how I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing everyone says you should not do, as long as you have done your homework and you are prepared for the consequences. I never regretted it, not for a single moment. And every time I walked out my front door and saw that grass strip, green and healthy and bike rack-free, I smiled. It was good to be home.